So we'll try to get through Genesis 50, which is the end of the book. So we saw Genesis 22, kind of this high point or the climax of Abraham's faith. And then the scene is going to kind of move or shift in the next couple of chapters over to Isaac. Isaac's family. It's kind of interesting in Genesis, or at least it always has been to me. Isaac doesn't have a ton of stuff said about him. There's not a ton of chapters devoted to him. There's a lot to Abraham. There's a lot to Jacob and his 12 sons. Not as much to Isaac. But anyway, after Genesis 22, Sarah dies in Genesis 23. Okay, so Genesis, I've got some notes here on the board that would be helpful to write down just as we go. Okay, Genesis 23 is where Sarah dies. Okay, now that's not unimportant as a detail, but it's the important fact is not just that, okay, Sarah has now moved off the scene. It's that Abraham purchases, for a lot of money, purchases Sarah's grave. Okay, now why are we focusing on this? Well, this will become sort of the family tomb in the land where family members will be buried. Okay, they will die and be put here. Now, the other important thing here is this is one of the first times in the land where Abraham and his family have real estate, have ownership of the land. Okay, so I'm going to just put here land ownership. Okay, so now they actually do have, and that's why they sell it for such a high price, is they don't want Abraham to start getting more and more powerful, owning more and more of the land that God has promised him. But he does, and so this becomes the kind of first stake of ownership that they have in the land. Okay, now Isaac, still alive, he needs a wife. Okay, and so Abraham sends his servant, probably Eliezer, who is kind of like another son to him, relative to him, though not technically related, sends him in Genesis 24. Okay, Genesis 24 to find Rebekah. Okay, who's related to Abraham. Abraham does not want Isaac to marry one of the women of the land, the pagan nations of Canaan. Okay, he wants somebody from his own family background, as somebody who would know God, know the Lord. Okay, so he chooses, goes and finds Rebekah. Okay, and Isaac and Rebekah get married. Okay, and they have their 2 sons. Okay, now since it's already written on the board, I won't have to ask you guys like the last class who their 2 sons are. They're Esau and Jacob. Okay, now this will be a little bit tricky to answer, but which son is older? Hudson.
Jacob. Esau.
Okay, well, let me explain why it's tricky, because Jacob and Esau are what? Twins. Okay, but who technically comes out first? Macy?
Jacob was grabbing onto his heel.
That's true.
Esau was older, but Jacob
stole the birthrights.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, and we'll get into that.
Older and his days on earth were older.
Yes, okay, so Esau is technically, all right, guys. So, yes. All right, guys, let me explain. Yes, Esau is technically older, but they're twins, okay? Patrick is right. Jacob comes out holding Esau's heel. In fact, the name Jacob means what? You guys know?
No.
Okay, it means like a heel grabber, somebody who's holding onto his heel. Okay, yeah, and that name is actually important. They named them, sometimes things that were pertinent to when they were born, but the names in Scripture, they're more important than kind of what we place on names today. It was kind of like, okay, this is kind of what God has said is going to be not their destiny, but that's kind of how God brought about these circumstances is going to be important some way in their life. And so Jacob, the name, like he who grabs the heel or the heel grabber, it's going to mean something that's kind of negative, like somebody who's kind of tricky, somebody who's kind of manipulative, somebody who's kind of a liar or a deceiver. And Jacob, that is kind of how he is. Esau means he's red, he's hairy, and so that's why he's named that. Patrick, did you have?
What does it say? Does it say Judah Gen 38?
Genesis 38.
And what does it say under it?
Yeah, it says, we'll get there, but that's and Onan. Okay, so we'll get there in a few minutes. Okay, but back here, Jacob is the one who God has said to Rebekah and to Isaac by extension, that Jacob is the one that God has chosen to carry on the line, even though he's not technically the oldest. Okay? Paul will pick up on this in Romans 9 when he's talking about salvation. He will say that it's really ultimately about God's choice. That the thing that makes the fundamental difference is not what man does, it's not what man wills, it's not what man thinks, it's not man's actions, it's not man's works. It's ultimately God's choice. Okay, now this is God's, in the case of Jacob, it's not salvation necessarily being talked about, but it's God's choice of, he says, the older will serve the younger. Okay, we see this as a pattern in Genesis. Cain is not the chosen son, neither is Abel. Seth is the chosen son. Okay, and so we see this, and we'll see this in the family line of Jacob as well, that the chosen son that's going to carry on the line to Jesus is Judah. Well, he's the fourth son, okay? But we'll get there in a minute. So this is a pattern here. And Paul will pick up on this and say, look, with twins, you could say, like with other people, that okay, there were differences in their lives, and that's what caused these different results. But when twins are born, same household, same time, everything about them is the same. The only difference between Jacob and Esau is fundamentally God's choice, okay, is what Paul is talking about. And he will use that to talk about God's sovereignty and salvation, that God, it's ultimately up to God, not up to us, okay? So, Jacob does grow up. Yeah, Vivian? Yeah. Jacob grows up, Esau grows up. Jacob is Rebekah's favorite. Esau is Isaac's favorite. So this attitude of personal favoritism does show up. And then Jacob's going to do the same thing to his sons as well. Do you guys remember who Jacob's favorite son is?
It was originally Joseph and Benjamin.
Yeah, Joseph, is his favorite son, and then Benjamin. And that's his favorite son because they come from his favorite wife. So you see this issue showing up. But God still uses this and works even in the midst of people's sin. Okay, so they grow up. Okay, now Jacob does presumably know the Lord. Esau is aware of the Lord as well. Isaac is aging. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. But Esau comes in from hunting. Okay, looking at Genesis 27, that Esau comes in from hunting after 3 days. He's a hunter, and Jacob is cooking some stew. And Esau asks for something to eat, and Jacob tries to strike a deal with him. Okay? And what does Jacob say? What does he ask for in exchange? Yeah.
His birthright.
He says, transfer the title of your being the heir of the family, transfer that to me. And Esau goes along with this, because Esau, as it refers to him in Hebrews 12, it warns against people like Esau. It says, be careful that there's not an immoral or godless person among you like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal. Okay, in other words, Esau is willing to like give up all the promises of God, all these things that he's supposed to benefit from and participate in, and says, look, I don't care about that, but I just, want this. Okay, so he just wants to gratify his own desire. Now, Esau he does regret that he does this, but it talks about in Hebrews 12, he found no place for repentance, even though he sought the blessing with tears. Meaning, even though he cried, even though he regretted it, even though he realized that was a stupid decision, he didn't repent and say that was wrong. I dishonored what God was doing, and I despised that and looked down on that. No, he just says, I wanted the benefit, and now I'm reaping the consequences of my actions. So Hebrews actually warns us, don't be like that somebody who's an immoral or godless person like Esau is willing to give up all the promises of God and not have repentance. So anyway, have you guys ever seen the "that escalated quickly" meme? Or they're like, well, that escalated quickly. There's a meme with Jacob and Esau. I didn't think to put it in a PowerPoint or something for you guys, but I'll find it later. There's a meme with Jacob and Esau where, Jacob's sitting there and Esau comes up and he says, hey, can I have something to eat? He's like, yeah, if you give me your birthright. And then it's the Will Ferrell guy being like, well, that escalated quickly. So it's like, well, we really upped the ante here. So yeah, there's that. Now, Jacob wants, and Rebecca tells him to do this as well, Jacob wants to go to Isaac before he dies and get Isaac's prophetic prayer over him that says, yes, you're the one who will receive what God has promised. You're the one who's carrying this thing forward. And so that's, the blessing, okay? And Rebecca was told, to be fair, that the older would serve the younger. But they come up with this plan of deception, and they're going to be able to do this because Isaac at this point in his older years is what? Blind. Yeah, he's dim in his sight. He can, he's probably not totally blind, but mostly. Okay. So so what does Jacob do in order to try to get the blessing? Yeah, Sophia.
He puts like a thing up around his arm, and his father says, "Come, let me feel you," to make sure his voice is deeper.
Yeah, and so why does he put? Gentlemen, let's pay attention, please. Why does he put fur on his arm? Yeah.
Because Jacob's very hairy.
Well, because Esau's very hairy. Exactly. Yeah. Macy, is that what you're gonna say?
Well, yeah, that and like he was like a hunter, so he probably would have worn like more like maybe like fur from like animals.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, and Esau is a hairy guy. Okay. So and also yes, he probably would wear the hair from animals and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting here because Isaac does seem to pick up on, is this really who I'm talking to? But he goes forward with it. So Jacob is successfully able to deceive him. So he receives the blessing from Isaac. So look at Genesis 27:27 or 26. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Please come close and kiss me, my son." And so he came close and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his garments, and he blessed him and said, "See, the smell of my son is like the field which the Lord has blessed. Now may God give you the dew of heaven, the fatness of earth, and the abundance of grain and new wine," meaning prosperity that kind of is like against the curse. Okay? Say, "May the peoples serve you," all right? "And nations bow down to you. Be master of your brothers, and may your mother's sons be bowed down to you. Cursed is the one who curses you, and blessed are those who bless you." Okay, so he reaffirms him, maybe adds on a little bit, but reaffirms to him the promise that was made to Abraham. It's coming through Isaac, but now he thinks it's Esau, but it comes to Jacob. And then later on, Isaac will say, well, I was deceived when Esau does come back. Now, who is obviously not too happy about this situation now that it's taken place? Esau. So Jacob leaves because he thinks Esau's going to what? Kill him. Yeah. So he flees, and in Genesis 28, he runs off. He's going to rejoin kind of his uncle on his mother's side and meet his cousins and stuff like this. But God does affirm in Genesis 28, an important chapter, does affirm the promises to Jacob. Does say, yes, it is going to be through you. You're going to be the one to carry forward the seed. You're going to be the one to carry on the promises. Yeah.
Is this when he wrestles God?
Not quite yet. That's in 32. So not quite yet. But Jacob goes and he names this place that he goes to Bethel. Okay, El is the name for God. Beth is the idea of house. So he names this place House of God because Jacob has this vision or this dream from God in Genesis 28. Can somebody read for us Genesis 28, 12, and 13? And then I need somebody, Patrick, yeah, you can do that one, and just hold it for a sec. And then can somebody else read John 1, 50 and 51? Wants to read John 1. Okay, Abigail. Okay. So Patrick, go ahead when you're ready and read Genesis 28.
All right. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and on top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give it to you and to your offspring.
Okay. So what's the picture that Jacob sees? What's the thing going on in the vision? Yeah.
A ladder that angels are like climbing up and down.
Yeah. So there's a ladder, and this we may think of as also like a big staircase that does what? It reaches into heaven. Yeah, it connects earth and goes into heaven, and God is standing above it, and then the angels are going up and down the ladder. And you guys may have heard of, it's referred, I mean, now we think of like a toy, but you guys have heard of like a Jacob's ladder, right? This is what it's talking about, is referencing this Genesis 28. Okay, now Jesus references this when he calls and talks to Philip, who's going to be his disciple, and Philip had been out praying under this fig tree, praying probably for the Messiah to come, the restoration of Israel, these things, okay? And then you guys remember when he says that Jesus said, Philip, I saw you when you were under the fig tree, but Jesus wasn't around when he said he saw him. Do you guys remember this? Mm-hmm. Okay. So Abigail, when you're ready, if you could read John 1, 50 and 51.
Jesus answered him, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree. Do you believe? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man.
Okay, so what's the phrase there that's really similar to Genesis 28:12? Jesus talking to himself. Yes, Sophia?
A ladder rising into heaven.
Yes, but what else is the phrase that's particular?
Angels ascending and descending?
Yeah, so in Genesis 28, you have the ladder and the angels going up, ascending and descending. Jesus says, you're going to see heaven open, the Son of Man, angels ascending and descending on them. So what Jesus is saying is, he's fulfilling that idea of heaven and earth actually connecting, that God dwells with man. So he's saying that, yes, this is ultimately about me, that I'll be the one that brings it together. Okay, so Jacob is affirmed. God says, yes, I am going to give you this land. I am going to give you the seed promise. It is going to continue through you. Okay, now Jacob in 29 through 30 or so goes back to kind of where his mom came from, and he meets his uncle, who's going to be a match for him, as far as Jacob's kind of a, tricky, manipulative guy, but he's going to be matched in that by his uncle Laban, who is also a kind of a dishonest, tricky, manipulative person. Okay, so he meets Laban, and he's happy to see him. Laban does welcome him in, have him there, and Jacob wants to get married. Who does he want to marry? Yeah.
Rachel.
He wants to marry Rachel, right? And so do you remember the deal that he strikes with his uncle to marry Rachel, Hudson?
If he works for him for like 8 years, he will enough, right?
You're right. It's a little less, 7, yeah.
Not 7.
So 7 years, then he can marry his daughter. Okay. So Jacob works for 7 years in order to marry Rachel. Okay. So, and there's this verse, kind of romantic sounding verse that talks about that the 7 years passed him like a couple days, you know. So anyway, so he wants to marry Rachel, but during the ancient Near East, like in the wedding, the bride is veiled, meaning all you see is, you know, like her eyes or something like that, okay? And same thing during the wedding night, okay? So Jacob wakes up the next morning and he realizes he didn't marry Rachel, he married who? Leah. Yeah. And why does Laban sneak in Leah? She's what, relative to Rachel? Yeah. Sophia?
I never asked me.
Okay, what, as far as age is what I'm referring to here.
Oh,
Patrick, yeah.
She's her older sister.
She's the older one, yeah. So Jacob goes, what the heck, you know, like what's going on here? And he goes, well, you know, I'm sorry, but I didn't say specifically Rachel, but here's the thing. Our custom is that the older daughter has to get married first. You said you worked 7 years for a daughter. We didn't specify exactly which one, so you ended up with Leah. You know, are you good with that? And Jacob says, no, I'm not good with it. You know, and so, I mean, Leah's kind of a sad story because she's the, like, unchosen wife, but she is the one that has, you know, like the 10 sons of Israel, okay? So yeah, it talks about that Jacob loved Rachel and hated Leah. And it's actually kind of sad. It doesn't mean hated in the sense of like he was going to kill her or something. It means it means she was like second best. He kind of just ignores her, you know. It doesn't, Rachel's his obvious favorite, gives birth to his obviously favorite sons. But Leah's the one that gives birth to Judah and the other 10. So it's through Leah that you get the line of the kings and the Messiah. So you can kind of see God, you know, people try to choose and God says, no, I'm going to choose this way. Okay, so what does, Laban makes Jacob another deal. You guys remember what the next part of the deal is? It's kind of similar to the last deal. Yeah.
If he works for another 7 years, then he can...
Yeah. Okay, so, okay. Now, you know, you've taken wife number 1, daughter number 1. If you give 7 more years of labor, you can have Rachel. Okay, and this time so Jacob does do that. He does marry Rachel. Okay, and then he eventually leaves, you know, Laban with his 2 wives. He also has some, not official wives, but he does have some concubines as well. Okay, so we're not saying this is right. Sometimes the scripture will describe things without pointing out. And by the way, this is bad. It doesn't always have to say that. Okay, so it's through these 2 women. Okay, guys. Through these 2 women and Jacob, that they have the 12 sons of Israel. This will be important because these will be the 12 tribes. Okay, so there's, you know, they're the 12 sons. You can look up and we'll talk about them more later. But they will become the 12 tribes. This is how the seed promise will get carried forward. Not just the seed for the Messiah, but the son Levi will also be the line that Moses and Aaron will come from, and that will be the line of the priests. Okay, so this is how God is bringing about the kind of divisions of what will become the nation of Israel. Okay, so the narrative here continues on. Jacob does wrestle with God in the sense that he is going to meet who again? Yeah, Hudson?
Did he win?
Sort of. I mean, it talks about here. Well, it's kind of funny what he says, what is said here, because it's not like God, you know, would have a hard time wrestling with Jacob. But you know, we'll look at what is said about this. Okay, so Jacob is going to meet who again, and he's afraid. Who's going to show up?
Esau.
Esau. Yeah, Esau's coming. He has 400 men with him, and Jacob's afraid to meet him again because the last time they were around him, he stole his blessing. He gave up his birthright. So Esau, he doesn't think is going to be happy with him, and so in this kind of strange story in Genesis 32. God shows up in human form. We'll talk about how we know it's God in a minute. But God shows up, and Jacob tries to kind of cling on to God and try to, he wants to grab hold of God for protection, like make God bless him, make God affirm everything to him. So look at Genesis 32, I'll start in verse 24. It says, "Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak." So this is God in human form. I'll talk about that in a second. It says, "When he saw that he had not prevailed against him," this is what God is noticing. So Jacob is fighting all night. It's not like God is, having a hard time with this. So he's, keeps beating Jacob back, but Jacob keeps coming back for more. And he says, when he saw that he had not prevailed against Jacob, he touched the socket of his thigh, and the socket of his thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Any of you guys ever dislocated a bone?
No.
No? What? Have you dislocated a bone? No? Okay. So I mean that's a pretty serious, especially a hip socket. That's a big deal. Now we don't see here to what extent the pain or lack thereof was, but this stops the fight. Okay. And then he said, this is the man speaking, he said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me," meaning I'm going to keep fighting, clinging on to you until you bless me. So God honors this request. Look at verse 27. He says, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Now we don't, okay, well, why does God ask him that? Well, remember, what does Jacob mean? Foot grabber, heel grabber, yeah. It means somebody who's manipulative or dishonest. And so he's saying, "Who are you?" And he's like, "What's your character?" And he says, I'm a heel grabber. I'm dishonest. I'm a liar. And so God renames him. He says, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel." Which, do you guys know what Israel means? Wrestles with God, yeah. He says, "For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." So that's also how we know he's striven with God. Then Jacob asked him and said, "Please tell me your name." And he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" Meaning, you already know who I am. If you're asking me to bless you, right? And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for he said, "I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved." Okay. Now he meets Esau the next day. Esau's actually happy to see Jacob, and they go in peace. And Genesis 36 talks about the descendants of Esau and his nation. Now that will become important because Esau is going to grow into a nation called Edom, E-D-O-M, that they are going to be kind of a brother people of Israel, but also kind of an enemy people of Israel. So they'll be antagonistic, okay? And you guys know Herod from the birth of Jesus, and okay, Herod is going to be what's called an Idumean. He's part of this line of Esau, okay? So you can see that conflict there. Okay, so moving on here, Jacob continues. Now, we get into the kind of final part of Genesis 37 through 50, and we start talking about the 12 sons. And again, who's Jacob's favorite son? Okay, Joseph. And what does he give? And you know why he's his favorite son? Because he's from who? Rachel, his favorite wife. Yeah, and Rachel eventually dies, right? And so that's why Jacob also has a special place in his heart for Benjamin and Joseph. Okay, and he wants Joseph to be the one that is the heir of the family. Okay, pay attention, guys. Leah's the one that 10 other sons come from. Okay, so Jacob gives Joseph what to show his favoritism of him? Coat of many colors. Macy, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So this is what we hear, the coat of many colors thing. It actually probably means like a seamless coat, a coat made of one piece of fabric that would have been expensive, something like that. It's not kind of as we think of like in the like Bible storybooks, or like there's kind of like a movie about this, that it was like this thing where it was kind of this rainbow coat. It's just something that's a gift showing, okay, you're the one that's going to be the one who is in charge of this family, and the other 11 sons resent Joseph for this, and so they come up with a plan to do what to Joseph? Well, first they want to what? First they want to kill him. And they say, we'll just tell our dad that, an animal tore him. And it's not just that they're jealous and want to kill him because they find him annoying. It's that he's being said to be the heir of the family. They're trying to get rid of him so that it can go to one of them. Eli, can you quit dropping that pen, please? Okay. So they throw him in a well, right? And instead of killing him, they decide, well, we can kind of get a greater benefit out of this by doing what? Sell him into slavery, okay? Now, we know the story with Joseph, right? He gets sold into slavery. Bad stuff happens to him, but he continues to trust God. He continues to honor God. And wherever he's at, he continues to have favor. So he's with this official called Potiphar, okay? He is given more trust and is able to rule over his kind of stuff. Potiphar knows the Pharaoh, most likely. All this stuff's going on here as Joseph is in Egypt. Now, Joseph's accused falsely of rape, okay, and then gets put in prison. But even there, he starts to have favor with the guards of the prison, and then is kind of given charge of the prison. And then he interprets visions or dreams for some of the people in the prison, and they come true. God gives him this ability, and one of those guys works with Pharaoh and then brings him in to interpret Pharaoh's dream. And then what the vision that he gives him is going to drive the 12 sons and Jacob into Egypt later on. But do you guys remember Pharaoh's dream, what was going on with that? Yeah.
7 skinny cows, 7 fat cows.
Yeah, and you remember what the dream represents? Yeah.
7 years of good, plentiful harvest and 7 years of famine.
Yep. So there's going to be a famine coming up, but there's going to be 7 good years before that. So God reveals this to Pharaoh, and Joseph interprets the dream for him. And so what he sees, these 7 gaunt, starving, skeletal cows, and these 7 fat cows, and the 7 skinny cows eat up the 7 fat cows. It says there's going to be kind of this famine. So they start saving, and Joseph is able to facilitate this for Egypt. Yeah.
So how old were Jacob's sons when they sold him to slavery? Because in 34, they seemed pretty old.
What in 34 stuck out to you about them being old?
2 of them killed an entire town.
Yeah, they're adults most likely, but they're having children at different ages, so it's kind of hard to know. But yeah, they're adults. They're responsible for their own behavior. So yeah, we don't know exactly how old Joseph is. Him and Benjamin are the younger ones, but yeah, they are probably, yes, they do kill a whole area of men after their sister is raped. They trick these guys. Yeah, it's a crazy story where they tell them, yeah, you'll join our clan now that you've raped our sister. We'll allow you to marry her, but you know what? You guys all need to be circumcised. And so they go through that process, but that's painful and it's especially as an adult, takes a long healing process. So they're laying down after 3 days of trying to heal from a circumcision, and so they come in and kill them all. And so it's there's this stuff that goes on in Genesis that's pretty just crazy. Just a lot of people don't know about. Yeah, so yeah, they're probably adults by that time. But anyway, okay, so that's what's going on with Joseph. Okay, and we know he moves to second command with Pharaoh, that because of the famine, Israel is going to be there. There's back and forth where Joseph, they don't recognize him. They're going to send people home, and they say, okay, well, I'll hold on to one of your sons. And then they come back with Jacob. Then eventually Joseph's revealed. But here's the thing. Did you guys ever do the VBS or something that was the Joseph VBS? You guys do this one? Okay. It goes Genesis 37 through 50, and we say is kind of like, this is the Joseph part of the book. But actually, Genesis 37 deals with Joseph. Genesis 39 continues on with the story of Joseph. What's between the two? What chapter? I mean, this is obvious. 38, yeah. This is where we actually see the chosen son and the chosen seed continuing to move forward in a very sinful story account of what's going on with Judah. Now, Jesus is called what? The Lion of the tribe of Judah. Yeah. So this is the line that has the kings. Judah is going to be changed by this event. He's going to commit great sin. But he is going to be changed and start to act like the leader of the family and say, I'll replace myself for my brother who gets left in Egypt, and these different things. And ultimately, he's the one that Jacob gives the blessing and says that the kings will be part of Judah, okay, ultimately leading to Christ. Okay, but Genesis 38, let me just explain what's going on there. It's a rough chapter. But it's important, and it often gets skipped over just to talk about kind of the fun story with Joseph, okay? But Genesis 38, Judah is married, has these two sons who are, the chapter describes them as evil in the sight of the Lord, okay? So he has this one son named okay? And he marries this woman named Tamar, okay? Now, is evil, so God does what?
Kills him.
Kills him. Yeah. Okay. Now, in this culture, if a woman is widowed and is part of your family, and this will later show up in the law in books like Ruth, okay, the job of the brother-in-law who is surviving is to do what?
Marry the widow.
Marry the widow. Yeah. To bring her in as part of his family, and then to have children with her, not to raise up seed for himself, not to raise up descendants for himself, but to raise up children in the name of who? His dead brother. Okay. So Onan is another son. Tamar goes and marries Onan. So what he decides to do is he says, okay, I don't want to raise up seed for my brother. But I do want to look like and get like I'm the credit of I'm being this nice guy who's taking care of my sister-in-law, and I want all the wealth of my brother to pass to me, because if I get to possess it, then and I don't have to pass it on to children, then I can enjoy it and then just continue my own family line in another way. Okay, so this is a really it may not seem like okay that's a big deal to us. But this is a thing that is like ancient Near Eastern culture, Jewish law is hugely shameful. This is also kind of not quite the same, but this is how David tries to make himself look after he has an affair with Bathsheba. He gets her husband killed in a war, and then he wants to look like he's bringing her in and being like, aren't I so nice of just taking care of this widow after her husband died in a war? You know, and that's what Nathan, the prophet, actually calls David out on, is not just the adultery, not just the conspiracy and murder, but the trying to make himself look honorable when in fact he's dishonoring God. And so that's what God really nails him on. Okay, so Onan has this plan. He marries Tamar, but prevents her from becoming pregnant. He does not allow her to become pregnant to raise up seed for his brother. And God does what to him? Kills him. Yeah, because in doing this, they are threatening the advancement of the family, okay, of the line. That's a big deal in this in the economy of the Old Testament, because the seed needs to go forward from these 12 tribes. Okay, ultimately, and especially for Judah, because that's leading to David, leading to Christ. Okay, so now we've got a problem. Judah's sons are dead, and now there's no one really to carry on the line. Okay, so Tamar comes up with a plan of, well, there's only one man left in this family, and that's her father-in-law. Okay, now Judah is a sinful guy as well, and he goes out of town to do something, and while he's out of town, it's his practice to look for prostitutes and have relationships with prostitutes. Okay, very sinful thing that he's doing. Tamar follows him, finds him there, disguises herself as a prostitute, and sleeps with him and has a son with Judah. Now, when how he pays her, because he doesn't have any money, is he says, look, I'm going to give you my staff and these different things to hold on to that are very important to me, so you'll know I'll come back and give you money, and then I'll pay you back later. Okay? Now, Judah, when he gets home, he realizes his unmarried daughter-in-law is pregnant. He says, you deserve to die for this. What you have now not only sinned, but you've now threatened the family by getting pregnant while not being married. Yeah.
Wait, so who is Tamar's father? Or mom?
I don't know who her father is.
So how is she related to Judah?
Daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
She was married to his son.
She married Ur, and Ur died. And
Oh,
Ur
then
was-
She's married. She's not related to Judah by blood. She married his son.
Oh, so she
Yeah.
was the one who was with Ur and Odom.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So now, yeah. So I know it's kind of, this is why we need mature mind to think about this. Kind of a gross story, kind of, very disgusting, sinful thing that's going on here. Now he says, look, you know what? Somebody who does this deserves to die, right? And then she shows him what? What did he give her?
Oh,
The staff. Says, it was you. And now Judah gets humbled. He actually does, it seems to indicate that he repents, and he says, you know what, she sinned too, but she's more righteous than I am. And so, but it's through this line, so there's sin, shame, bad things going on here, but yeah, it is through this line that you get David and that you get Jesus. Okay, but this is an important story because it's how God changes Judah into actually causing him to be humbled, causing him to repent, and be who he's supposed to be as the kind of the leader of the family. Now, this is not usually, kids, like I asked about the Joseph VBS, like we do Genesis 37 and then we skip to 39 through 50 with Joseph. But, this isn't usually the one that, like, you teach kids in Sunday school, right? Because there's, like, stuff going on here, But it is important because this talks about, it seems like Joseph's going to be the chosen son, and he is in the sense that he's going to be the one used to kind of save the family in Egypt. But Judah is actually the chosen son where the line is going to go forward through him. Okay, so God is working these things together. Okay, and then just to finish up here, look at Genesis 49, and make sure you write down Genesis 49, 8 through 12. This is after Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. He's kind to them. He forgives them, welcomes them in. His father comes. Okay, now they live there in Egypt. They're not supposed to leave the land, but they do go live there in Egypt, and that's where Exodus is going to take place later. And Jacob gives this prayer blessing to each of his sons. Listen to what he says to Judah. Genesis 49:8. He says, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. You're the ones top. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down to you. Judah is a lion's whelp. Right? The lion comes to represent Judah. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion. Who dares rouse him up? The scepter. Okay, who holds the scepter?
The priests.
Kings, yeah. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. Okay, so I mean, kingly line is now in Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the nation. So there's going to be this king nicknamed Shiloh, which means him to whom everything belongs. And it says that everybody, all the nations are going to bow to him, that he's going to rule the nations and reverse the curse. This is the seed of the woman who's going to crush the head of the serpent. This is the one who's going to rule the gates of his enemies. It talks about in Genesis 22. Okay, so it's a reference to the Messiah or to Christ. Okay, who's going to come from Judah. Okay, and in the book of Ezekiel, way later in the Old Testament, as everything's kind of falling apart, Ezekiel will say, the kings have failed, the priests have failed, God's done with them. He's going to wipe that off the map and start over until one comes to whom it belongs, who can unite them both, who can be the priest but also be the king. Okay. Now, last thing here. After Israel, Jacob dies, the brothers are afraid that he was only being nice to them because of Jacob still being alive. Okay, so they say, please, we'll be your slaves, we'll do whatever. And Joseph, speaks to them. He says, ultimately this, that you meant it for evil, what you did to me, but God meant it for good. Got to write down Genesis 50:20. You meant it for evil, God meant it for good. Now, why that's key is because, remember, God creates the world good in the beginning. There's a challenge to that with sin. Evil is all over the world, right? Man is part of the problem. Now the question of Genesis for God's agenda for the world is, can God make evil into good? And Joseph says that God can actually work and be so sovereign over everything that he can turn evil situations into his ultimate good. Okay, so that's important for picking up on the rest of the Bible. Okay, we got it.